Hello, welcome to yet another session on Facebook Live with the IELTS tutor. And if you've just joined us, welcome to today's lesson, this time on IELTS reading, for which we're going to be addressing the 5 most common answering mistakes. Okay, so before we begin, let's go through what the objectives are for today's lesson. So hopefully by the end of today's lesson you will be able to understand the common problems that are related to answering the sentence and summary completion type tasks, as well as short answer questions. Okay, now secondly, hopefully by the end of this lesson, I hope that you will be able to apply easy solutions to this type of question or type of task. And finally, by the end of today's lesson, hopefully you'll be not only able to read for gist, you'll also be able to gain a general understanding of how a text is written without having to understand all of the vocabulary and all of the difficult words involved in the passage. So let's get started. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at 5 of the most common problems related to this type of task. One of the things that are stopping people from scoring a high band for this type of task question is looking for the exact keywords that they see from the question and try to match them to the text. Now, this is actually not a very wise thing to do, because students who are not used to this type of task tend to look for words in the text that directly match the ones that you see in the questions. So this shouldn't happen at all. I think you in the IELTS reading test, you are pressed for time, so you don't really you have to strategize yourself carefully and make sure that you don't look for exactly those words that appear in the question and try to match them to the ones in the in the text or the passage, because you need to not really find exact synonyms, but perhaps even you have to paraphrase certain ideas and try to match them to the questions. We'll look at that in a short while, but that's one of the most common problems that students or IELTS candidates tend to have when they when they try to scan for the exact same word in the passage as they would find in the question. Okay, now the second problem, the second obstacle that is stopping you from getting a high band score is going over the word limit. I think this is something that's quite straightforward. You need to make sure that you follow the instructions exactly as they tell you to. Okay, because if they ask you to write no more than 3 words, you should not write 4 words exactly, because what you're doing here is you're just going to throw away your precious marks, even though your answer may be right, because you have gone over that word limit by just 1 word. Your whole answer would be marked as completely wrong, which is a shame. So try to go within the stated word limit, or otherwise you run the risk of having the correct answer but being marked wrong because you have not followed instructions and gone over the word limit instead. Okay, another common problem that candidates seem to have is reading every single word that they see in the passage. Now, as I've mentioned before, in the reading test, a lot of candidates are pressed for time. It is a test of your time management skills as much as it is a test of your language skills. So you need to make sure that you strategize yourselves very well so that you do not waste time reading every single word in the text. There are thousands of words in those 3 passages, and you do not have time to read at leisure. So make sure that you are able to skim and scan for specific information very quickly, because you don't have time to read every word. Okay? Now, the next problem that candidates seem to have is this one here: spending too much time on words that are not familiar. So what commonly happens, this is what I normally see in the classroom when I teach students, is that when they see students, when students see a word that they don't understand in the question, they would either grab their dictionary next to them and look up the word. I mean, in the real test, you won't be able to do this, of course. Or secondly, they would panic. Or thirdly, they would dwell on that word for a very long time, thinking about what could possibly be the meaning of that word. Okay, so this is something that you need to avoid. When you see a word that you do not understand, do not check the dictionary in your test practice. Do not panic, because that's the worst thing that could happen. If you panic, it might have a domino effect, and then you might not do well in for the rest of the questions. And also, do not spend more than 2 minutes thinking about that question or the word in that question. Okay, so we will take a look at how we're going to overcome this, to try to find the correct answer within the time limit that you're given. Okay, and one of the most common problems that could easily be avoided is students writing full sentences. Okay, writing full sentences in their answer. Now, in the instructions, you would have already been instructed to give perhaps no more than 3 words in your answer. So coming up with a 3-word sentence is almost quite impossible unless it's a subject, a verb, and 1 object. Yeah? So do not try to write full sentences. Do not try to be grammatically correct. The most important thing that you have to consider is making sure that you stay under the word limit. You will not be marked for grammar. You will not be marked for the complexity of your sentences. It's really, really just straightforward. Just make sure that you answer the question directly within the word limit that you're given. Okay, so these are the 5 most common types of problems that candidates seem to face when they are given a short answer task to do. So please try to avoid these. If you're guilty of doing any of these, you need to make sure that you stay away from doing any of these things when you do your test practice, and most importantly, when you do your test. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to move on to what you are basically tested on when you're given a short answer question type of task. Okay. First of all, you need to make sure, you will be tested on your ability to skim a passage quickly and understanding its overall meaning. Okay, so this is what you're going to be tested on in the reading test. Not only that, you will be also tested on whether or not you can scan for specific information within the time, not just within the time frame, but also within the word limit that you're given. You will also be tested on whether or not you can understand the question that you're asked. Okay, are you able to follow, not just follow instructions, but are you able to find exactly the answer to the question? Are you able to answer the question directly? Okay, so this takes a little bit of analysis. When you're given a question, make sure that you approach the question carefully. At the same time, you will be tested on whether or not you're able to identify keywords, not just in the question, but also similar meanings of the keywords from the question in the text itself. So to do this, you are also being tested on your ability to come up with possible synonyms and paraphrases of the keywords in the questions. So these are the things that you're tested on in your reading test for short answer questions, not just for short answer questions, but other task types as well. So, the type 4 and type 5, I think, are quite unique to short answer task types. So you're going to be tested on whether or not you can identify the important words in the question, and also to find similar meanings or ideas from the passage to try and answer the questions that are given to you. Okay, so one of the things that you need to avoid is just trying to match keywords from the passage to the keywords in the question. It doesn't work that way. What you need to do is to identify the keywords in the question and then try to look for possible synonyms to those keywords in the question. The synonyms should be found in your passage or your text. And if there are no synonyms, are there any paraphrases or sentences with the same ideas as the keywords in the question? That's what you need to do. Okay, so let's take a look at some important tips that you need to be aware of when you are doing this type of question. First of all, be aware that the answers you need to look out for appear in the same order as in the text. So, for example, question number 1, your answer should be, could possibly be found earlier on in the text, maybe the first 2 paragraphs in the passage. Question number 2 might be after the first 2 paragraphs. Question number 3 could be later, found in the later section of the text, and so on and so forth. So they kind of correspond. Where the answers appear correspond to correspond to the questions in your task. Okay. So it should not be difficult for you. You don't really have to worry about jumping around the passage to search for the answers in your passage. You can just look for the answers in order. You don't have to worry about randomly looking for information. They should appear in the same order as the questions in the text. In the task. Okay. Next thing that you need to do, excuse me, is to look at the question very carefully. Okay. Look at the question very carefully and ask yourself this question: What is the question actually asking you to find? Okay, so make sure that you understand the question. The questions basically are quite straightforward. I think a common mistake that a lot of candidates tend to make is that they overanalyze the questions. And this is quite a dangerous thing to do, because if you think too much about something, and then your thought process tends to go away into something else, and then you start to go down a rabbit hole, and this is something you need to avoid. Look at the question carefully. Don't try to interpret the question to something else that's not there. The question asks you something that's straightforward. find a direct answer to it. That's all there is. Okay, so make sure that you don't overanalyze. Look at the question, understand the meaning. There is no deeper meaning. You know, it's not a philosophical question or anything like that where you have to think so deeply about the answer. Just look at the question and just find a similar idea to the keywords in the question from the passage, or find a synonym that matches the keywords in the question. Okay, so make sure that you understand it very well. Okay, as mentioned before, do not go over the word limit. Okay, so if you are asked to write no more than 3 words, please write exactly 3 words or fewer. Okay, don't be a daredevil and try to write 4 words, squeeze in an extra word. Do not write a full sentence, because you're not required to do this. So just make sure that you stay under the word limit, or exactly within the word limit. Okay, again, do not give complete sentences. Do not write complete sentences. You do not. Okay, this is not an essay test or writing test. It's a reading test. Okay, so you do not need to be grammatically correct with your answers. You just need to find the answer and then write it down in 3 words or fewer, or 5 words, depending on the instructions. Just make sure that you read that instruction very carefully. Okay. Now, the other thing that you need to be aware of is your opinions. Okay. It doesn't matter what you think about the passage, whether or not you think something is true or false, or whether you agree with an idea or an issue being discussed. It does not matter. Okay, so do not put your opinion because of this or that, based on your world experience or whatever. Just make sure that you answer the questions based on the evidence in the text. That's all. Okay, again, it is not a writing or an essay test where you are asked to give your opinion. It's a reading test where you are asked to give your answer based on the evidence that you see in the passage. So do not give your opinions at all. All right, finally, oh no, 2 more. Okay, you need to look out for nouns or noun phrases in the question, because sometimes the important words in the question will be nouns in the form of nouns or noun phrases. So try to look out for try to look out for these types of word form, and see if you can identify synonyms or similar ideas in the passage to match those nouns or noun phrases. So we'll look at some examples later on. Okay, now finally, when you find your important words or your keywords, before you even look at the passage, try to think of possible synonyms for these words, or possible paraphrases for these keywords as well, because it might be a lot easier for you to find them in the passage. Okay, so these are the 7 useful tips that you need to remember when you are answering this short answer question task type. Now, important strategies or steps that you need to be aware of when it comes to this kind of task is, okay, I can't stress this enough, look at the instructions and make sure that you remember the word limit. Okay, if it's 3 words exactly, no more than that. If it's 4 words, make sure that you answer in 4 words exactly, no more. Of course, you can answer fewer, but yeah, just do not go over the word limit. The next thing that you need to do is to study the questions and think very carefully about what the question is asking you for. Okay, like I said before, there is no deeper meaning in the question. You do not need to overanalyze. Just read the question and find the answer to the question as quickly as you can. If you're doing a practice test, I think it would be useful for you to have a highlighter handy to highlight important keywords in each question. If you are doing this in the real test, use your pencil to underline or circle important words in each question so that when you go back to the question, as you look for the answer or scan for the answer in the passage, you don't have to look for the keywords in the question again. You don't have to waste time, precious seconds in identifying the keywords in the questions again. Just make sure that you go through the questions, identify the keywords and circle or underline them. Okay, so that when you go back and forth between passage and question, you don't have to think about what the keywords are. Every second counts, even half a second, I think. You need to make sure that you read fast and that you do not waste any time repeating something that you could have done once and then, moving on. Now, next step is to identify possible synonyms or paraphrases from the passage. Okay? Think about, once you've looked at the keywords in the question, go to the text, go to the passage. What are the possible synonyms or paraphrases for these keywords? Are there any words that match the important words in the question? Are there any, even if there are no synonyms, are there any similar ideas that reflect the meanings of the keywords in the question? Think about them, okay? And you don't have to spend too long on this. As I've mentioned before, if you're doing question number one, your answer should appear at the beginning of the passage, not towards the end. So you shouldn't spend too much time moving your eyes around the passage. Just make sure that you stay within that section to look for the synonyms or paraphrases for these key words. Now, once you have identified the synonyms and paraphrases for these keywords, like I said, find the section where you can get this answer and stay within that section. Okay, don't look anywhere else. And then go back to the question again, read the question, but don't overanalyze it. Okay, does it, the answer in the section, does it directly answer the question? Does it directly answer the question? So when you read the section again, try to confirm the answer. Is it exactly what the question is asking? Does it answer directly what the question is asking? And then move on to the next question and repeat the same cycle. Okay? So these are the steps that you need to remember to make sure that you read the question first very carefully, identify the keywords, look for the section where you can find a matching paraphrase or synonym to the keywords in the question, and confirm your answer. And then move on to the next question. Do the same thing. Question 3, do the same thing over and over again. It takes a bit of practice. In fact, it takes a lot of practice for you to be able to do this within the time limit that you're given. You're not given a lot of time. So you need to make sure that you're able to do this fast. It becomes second nature to you. Okay? Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to, before we look at a passage, an example passage, we are going to try to orientate ourselves to the the text first. Okay, so if you look at, okay, I'm just showing you this graph. I can't really, okay. My first question is, look at this graph. Before we look at the text, look at this piece of visual information. What information does this bar chart contain? Okay, so if you can identify the information, you know, it's it would be good if you could type it in the comment box or just shout out the answer to me at the screen. Okay, I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds to think about this. Okay, what it shows are the general levels of happiness in different countries. Okay, and you can see that these countries are arranged in order from happiest to the least happy. All right, so that's what the chart here shows. Now, my next question is, are you able to make true statements about these countries? I'm going to show you these countries next. So pay attention. If you have a pen and paper ready, it would be a good idea for you to try to make notes on as we go along. Okay, so we've got 6 different types of countries, 6 different countries. Nigeria, see if you can identify the flags or the countries that I mentioned here, if you can match them. Romania, USA, Mexico, Australia and Russia. What true statements can you make about these countries? Okay, not based on your general knowledge or what you know or your background information. If you could copy these countries down on a piece of paper, I'm going to go back to the chart to show you, if you can, to show you the data and the figures again, so that you can make true statements about these countries in terms of their levels of happiness. Okay, so let's go back to the chart. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a few seconds, or maybe about a minute. Let me start my clock timer here to see if it works. Okay, 1 minute. Okay, have I given you enough time? Okay, I haven't seen any comments here, so I'm just going to assume that you have. Okay, if not, then you can just, if you're watching this on recording, you can just pause the video. Okay, so I'm just going to show you some possible statements that you can make about, first of all, Nigeria. Okay, you can see that it's the highest bar there. So, Nigeria, what can we say about this? So we can say that it has the highest, let's take a look at the chart again. Oh, that's not it. Okay, so we can say that Nigeria has the highest percentage of very happy people. Yay! Between 65 and 70% of the population are very happy. So you can see that it's quite a high bar there, between 65 and 70%. Okay, so this is possibly the statement that you should have written. Okay, Nigeria having the highest percentage of very happy people. What about Romania? What can you say about Romania? Let's take a look at the chart again. Okay, so we've got Nigeria here, and Romania is way down here. Quite a dramatic difference, isn't it? Okay, so I think for the benefit of those of you who haven't actually finished this task, I'm going to give you another minute to maybe write an answer down or a sentence down. See if you can match yours with my observations. Okay, so I'm just going to put the countdown timer on for 60 seconds. Okay, so what can you tell me about Romania? Okay, if you say that Romania has the lowest percentage of very happy people, you are right. Give yourselves a pat on the back, because that is exactly what you should have written down. And let's talk about this in figures. So you can see that less than 5% of the population are very happy as compared to Nigeria. So less than 5% of the population are very happy. So let's take a look at how we can put this down in writing. Okay, so Romania has the lowest percentage of very happy people, which is a bit sad. I don't. People might disagree with this, with these figures here, but anyway, based on what we can see, less than 5% of the population are very happy. So there you go. All right, now, what can you say about the USA and Mexico? Okay, let's talk about them together. Let's go back to the charts. So we've got Mexico over here and the USA over here. So what observations or comparisons can you make about them? Okay, so I'm going to give you 60 seconds again to think about this. Okay, so what can you see, or what comparisons can you make about the two countries? So for a start, we can say that the USA has a lower percentage of very happy people than Mexico. Okay, so that's quite obvious. You can see from the levels there. Mexico over here and the USA over here. Now, if you are going to compare figures, you can say that the chart shows a figure of about 60% for Mexico and about 40% for the USA. Okay, so this is the observations that you can make about the two countries. The USA has a lower percentage of very happy people than Mexico. And the chart shows a figure of about 60% for Mexico and about 40% for the USA. And finally, what can you say about Australia and Russia? Okay, so let's go back to the chart again. Australia over here and Russia over here. Okay, so a minute to think about these two countries. Okay, so Australia and Russia. What can you say about them? Okay, for a start, you can say that Australia has a much higher percentage of very happy people compared to Russia. And what can we say about the data that's given here? You can say that over 40% of Australians are very happy. Okay, over 40%. Slightly goes over there. I don't think it, if you look at it a little bit more closely, it doesn't look like it's exactly, but slightly over 40% of Australians are very happy compared with less than 10% of Russians. Okay, so you can see that it goes below this white line here. All right, so we can put it down in words in this way. Australia has a much higher percentage of very happy people than Russia. Over 40% of Australians are very happy compared with less than 10% of Russians. So if you've made correct observations like these, give yourself a clap on the back. Oh, sorry, a pat on the back, not a clap. Give yourselves a huge pat on the back for a job well done. And you can also use this style of writing for academic task 1. So if you're asked to make comparisons and observations about figures and data or general information, you can just do it in this way. Of course, this is quite a simplistic version. You need to make sure that you have linking words and words of comparison, like what we have here: highest, lowest, lower, much higher, and so on. Okay, but we're not going to be talking about writing today. We're going to be we're focusing on reading. So let's not digress or talk about something That's not related to today's topic. Okay, again, before we look at the text, I want you to think of, I'd like you to think of factors that could explain why the populations of some countries are happier than the populations of others. So I think this would be quite, a useful thing for you to think about in case you're asked this question in IELTS Speaking Part 3. You know, your examiner might ask you a question like, why do you think the populations of some countries are happier than the populations of other countries? Now, how are you going to answer that? So if this would be based on your general understanding, your background knowledge, not based on evidence that you've seen, like what we saw from the charts. So why do you think some countries are happier than other countries, to put it in a simple way? Okay, if you haven't already shouted out your answer to me or at me, I'll give you a few seconds. In other words, I'll give you 60 seconds to think about factors that can make some countries happier than other countries. Okay, and then we're going to try to compare notes as we after 60 seconds and see whether or not your ideas match mine. Okay, 60 seconds to think about this, starting now. Why are some countries happier than others? What factors? Okay, any ideas? Okay, all right. So if you think that one of the main factors could be culture, you may be right. So culture could be an influencing factor because the way of life can be very drastically different from one country to another. So it can vary enormously from one country to another. In some countries, people feel a certain pressure to succeed and they tend to work under a lot of stress. So that could be one reason why they are generally unhappy. While in others, the pace of life is much slower, okay? And there is a greater emphasis placed on things like family, friends, and relaxation. So there is not much of a rat race, if you could put it idiomatically. So you can talk about this in terms of culture. And you can also provide examples like Nigeria. Why are people in Nigeria so much happier than people in Russia, for instance? So you can talk about the way of life. Another influencing factor could be materialism. Okay, so you could discuss this with your examiner in the sense that in many Western countries, acquiring material possessions is given a lot of importance or considerable importance. And so therefore, a great deal of effort is spent on creating wealth, okay, or wealth creation. And then in more traditional societies, money is of little or no significance at all. And material possessions are either not available or they are not particularly valued. So you can give some examples of where this happens. So you can talk about materialism being a factor in determining happiness. Also, you can talk about basic needs. For example, in some countries, basic needs such as food, water, and shelter are not guaranteed. Okay, so give some examples of this, where food, water, and shelter are not guaranteed. And because of this, it can cause very significant levels of stress and unhappiness. So you can talk about what's happening around the world now, where people are not able to obtain basic needs like food, water, and shelter. Okay. And finally, you can talk about the issue of climate. How does climate influence a person's or people's happiness? So you can talk about, interestingly, you can talk about how most people require reasonable levels of daylight to sustain them. And many people are happier if they experience good levels of warmth and sunshine. So make sure you have some sort of examples to back this up. In some countries, there is very little daylight at certain times of year and often little or no sunshine. So you can talk about how this can also contribute to much unhappiness. So climate could be an influencing factor in determining how happy people are in a country. So these are just some things for you to think about. Okay? Now, let's move on to reading for gist. Now, before we do that, if you could also talk about your own country. If your country is listed in the bar chart that we've looked at earlier, do you think it's a true reflection of the people in your country? If your country is not in the chart, let's go back to the chart again. If your country is not in the chart, where would you place your country in this bar chart here? Okay. All right, so we're going to begin with the skill of reading for gist. All right, now, before we begin, I'd like to remind you that you need to read texts quickly to get a general idea of what they're about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some general topics. If you have a piece of paper and a pen to copy it down, you're welcome to do that. If not, you can just pause and have a good long look at these topics. And then I'm going to show you the text to see if any of these topics are covered in the text. Okay, did you get that? So look, let me just show you here. I think it's a lot easier if I show you. Okay, look at these topics. Can you tell me which of these general topics the passage will cover, or the passage that I'm about to show you? Which topics does it cover? So try to copy these topics down, and then I'll show you the text or the passage. I'll give you a minute. Okay. I'm going to show you the passage. Okay, moving on to the next page. 30 seconds. Don't read word for word, just scan through it. Okay, next page. 30 seconds. Okay, here comes the next page. For 30 seconds. And I think here comes the final page. No, it's the second last page. 30 seconds. Scan through this. Okay, I'm turning the page again. And this should be your final page. 30 seconds. Okay, so I hope you have managed to identify the topics that appear in the text. Let's go back to the topics again. Okay, the list of topics over here. If you didn't get enough time, you would be able to replay this recording, because I think we're running out of time now, so I'm going to have to cut it short and stop here for now, but we will pick this up hopefully in the next IELTS reading lesson, and we're going to be dealing with how to answer this type, the short answer question task type in your IELTS reading section. Okay, so if you do have any questions, please just write a quick comment in the comments box below, or you can just send me an email, or not. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me for today's lesson, and hopefully I'll see you back here for more. Okay, so have a good start to the week ahead. Take care. Bye-bye for now.